Possible for the RCMP to properly investigate. He is not worth the cost, he is not above the law, and he must cooperate with the RCMP.
The Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Speaker, today I had the honour of hosting a Polish Youth Summit on Parliament Hill. Over 30 young leaders from across Canada gathered to talk about issues important to Polish Canadians, to discuss strategies for getting more young people engaged in politics. There are 1 million Polish Canadians in Canada working hard to build communities that are vibrant,
and we will be starting the questions very soon. Let's see what the speaker's up to today. Once again, he's going over time.
And I'm excited for what the future holds.
On the SO31 for the member statement.
People who peacefully drove the solidarity movement that brought democratic change to Europe. And this week, 70% of Poland's young people turned out and voted in the national election. Young people have the power to change the world. And I want to thank the Canadian Polish Congress, the Polish Canadian Business and Professional Association of Windsor, and the Embassy of Poland for working together to organize this summit and to empower Canada's young eagles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There we are.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, he's not worth the cost of housing, which doubled since he took power. The middle class in Ontario, a couple sold their house to buy a castle in France, a 6,000-foot castle on 37 acres. They said they couldn't sell that castle to buy a house in Ontario. Why is it more expensive to be a member of the middle class in Canada than an aristocrat in France? The Honourable Minister. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. There's one thing the Leader of the Opposition can do, just one, to help Canadians. It's to vote for our Affordability Act. We want to reform competitiveness, but we want to get rid of GST for building new housing. For once, finally, will the opposition vote for Canadians, yes or no? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 8 years, this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost, and another law isn't going to change that. Yesterday, Conservatives raised a question with the Minister of the Environment. We asked if, yes or no, the department had warned this government that its so-called regulations on fossil fuels was going to disproportionately increase costs for people with lower incomes. And the answer is yes. The Bloc wants to increase this regulatory tax. Will this government finally overturn this tax so that Canadians can buy food and housing? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to remind the opposition leader that in their campaign platform for 2021, they proposed setting up standards for clean energy. The difference between us and them is that they just talk about it, whereas we're acting on it. Thanks to the standards in place, thousands, or rather millions, are being invested all over the country to help Canadians reduce their carbon footprint when they use their cars. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We know that after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he took office. It's gotten so crazy that the cost of a house in Ontario means that one couple sold their 2,000 square foot home in that province and was able to buy a 6,000 square foot castle on 37 acres of land in France. They now say they could never sell the castle and afford to move back to Canada. Why does it cost more to be a member of the middle class in Canada than to be an aristocrat in France?
I've got to ask you people watching right now, you're hearing he's not worth the cost from the Conservative? Do you think that's an effective slogan? Or does it remind you of he's just not ready? in 2015. The same idiots who ran that campaign are now behind polio. It's the same stupid, asinine, inane type of talking point. Justin Trudeau's, it's not just he's not worth the cost. He's a catastrophe. And this is, once again, they don't know how to go after their political opposition. And this is absolutely insane. They cut the sound again.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
None of the bills are affordable after 8 years of this government. I asked, why is it that you can buy a castle in France for a lower cost than a middle-class home in Ontario? And his response was basically, let them eat cake, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, people can't even afford bread after 8 years of inflationary policies. Will they reverse their inflationary deficits and reverse their tax hikes so Canadians can eat, heat, and house themselves?
L'honorable ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the Leader of the Opposition refuses to explain to Canadians why he won't support legislation that is going to make housing more affordable, that's going to build more rental units for Canadians, that's going to make groceries more affordable. Mr. Speaker, it has been clear that for the past 8 years that they've been in opposition, they haven't done anything to support Canadians. What we do know is that they've constantly voted against measures that support Canadians, like childcare, like the Canada Child Benefit, and like this legislation that they have an opportunity to do the right thing and to vote for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They've been promising for 8 years that their bills would lower the cost, but since that time, housing costs have doubled. They promised their carbon tax would make people better off. Then they brought in a second carbon tax. And we asked the government's own officials at committee yesterday if their analysis showed that the cost would rise for energy and that these costs would be borne disproportionately by the poor and middle class. And that government official confirmed that, yes. Why is this government taxing the people who can least afford it? Will they admit that after 8 years, they're simply not worth the cost?
L'honorable ministre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a study that came out 2 days ago, in Canada, 60% of small and medium-sized business across the country have been affected by extreme weather events this year alone. 44% of them say that it has a direct hit on their revenue. What's the response from the Conservative Party? Let's make pollution free again. Let's have more climate change. Let's have more air pollution and water pollution. I think Canadians can take any of the proposition that the Conservative Party of Canada has for them, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. This is day 13 of the war between Israel and Hamas. Humanitarian needs are more acute than ever. The United States pledged $100 million in humanitarian aid. Canada pledged too little. But even more important than money, aid has to be able to reach the civilians who desperately need it. As we speak, only 20 trucks have permission to enter Gaza. According to the United Nations, at least 100 are needed per day. We're far from that goal. Has the Prime Minister spoken to Israel and Egypt to ask for better access to provide humanitarian aid?
So how many days this week has Justin Trudeau not attended question period? He's never there. Oh, but his good friend Melanie is.
For access to provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. Gaza is one of the most difficult places to live right now on the planet. It's important to get aid into Gaza. We're going to continue to engage with different countries in the region for that to get done.
L'honorable député de La Prairie.
Monsieur le Président, il y a une chose que le Canada peut faire.
There's one thing that Canada can do on the world stage, and that's show humanitarian leadership. I know it's a lot to ask of Egypt in terms of opening its border to Hamas-occupied territory. I know it's a lot to ask of Israel when Hamas is holding 203 hostages, but humanity can only come from them. It can't come from the monsters behind Hamas. Humanitarian aid has to reach civilians. What's the Prime Minister doing to make sure that it gets done quickly? The Honourable Minister for International Development. The current humanitarian situation is deeply concerning for our government. Civilians are the first victims of this tragedy. Canada's commitment to provide humanitarian aid remains unshakable. Getting aid to civilians is essential. We implore all parties to protect civilians and to, in all circumstances, maintain their commitments towards upholding international humanitarian law.
Toronto's housing crisis is out of control, worsened by the loss of thousands of affordable homes by both conservative and liberal governments.
All right, we can shut Mr. Jagmeet Singh off for a while. But I really want to get some feedback from the audience here in terms of this new conservative slogan, which is he's just not worth the cost, or he's not worth talking about Trudeau. I mean, do you really think it's that minimal? That he's just not worth the cost. But if it was a little less of a cost, he'd be worth it. This is how these conservative backroom people do not think. We are facing a crisis in Canada. A crisis. It's not that he's just not worth the cost. He is devastating the country in many, many ways, especially with censorship. Never mind, he's not worth the cost. Yeah, he spends a lot of money and he gets into a lot of scandals, and he's a problem. But he is devastating our country, and that's got to be the focus, not these stupid, inane slogans that the party comes up with. And you know where those are coming from. I can tell you right now. Yeah, the same people who were the architects of defeat in 2015, namely Jenny Burr and others.
Find a smaller apartment, less well adapted, and more expensive. That's unacceptable. That's the result of the Conservatives and Liberals who have failed to get more affordable housing available. What does this government have to say to the thousands of people like her? The Honourable Minister. I thank my colleague for his question. One thing he could do to help Canadians, one thing, and that's vote for the Affordability Act. Why? Because not only will that change how competition runs in the country, it will remove GST for new housing builds. I implore the opposition, all members of this House, to vote in favor of Canadians, because Canadians really need it.
After 8 long years of this Liberal NDP government doubling the national debt, doubling mortgage and rental costs, Canadians could also see a 40% increase in their monthly mortgage costs. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. 85% of variable rate mortgage holders believe they are worse off. Liberal inflation, fueled by liberal deficits, made the most rapid interest rate hikes ever. And now Canada's most at risk in the G7 for a mortgage default crisis. When will the Prime Minister rein his inflationary spending in so interest rates can come down and Canadians can keep a roof over their heads?
It's amazing how they are snatching defeat from the jaws of victory right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Canada
Relying
has
on
the lowest
stupid
deficit
slogans.
among all G7 countries.
I
Canada
am
has
just amazed.
been reaffirmed its AAA credit rating because our fiscal frame is responsible. But, Mr. Speaker, we continue to support Canadians, and the Conservatives continue to call.
All right, so Trudeau is gone again today. Freeland is gone again today. Why do you think cabinet ministers are disappearing throughout the week? What do you think they're working on? You think it's all focused on Alberta and the CCP? Or sorry, the Canada, CPP. Yeah. You think that's what it is?
Uncomfortably close to broke, according to an MNP survey, with more than 50% of Canadians $200 away from insolvency. After 8 years of failed Liberal policies, they're just not worth the cost. There's young Canadians and fixed senior incomes living in their cars and under bridges in tents. That's the state of Canada after 8 years of their failed policies. Will this Prime Minister balance the budget, get inflation and interest rates down so more Canadians don't have to live out on the streets?
Yeah.
There they go, cutting the sound again.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I've been a member of Parliament since 2015. From day one, that side has pursued an austerity agenda. Canada Child Benefit, they want to cut it. Supports for seniors, they've never been there. Supports for businesses during the pandemic and since, they've never been there. We brought down taxes for small businesses not once, but twice. They opposed it every single time, Mr. Speaker. We're helping cities with public transit, with other infrastructure. They are not there. They're not worth the risk, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, you look like you came up with your own. They're not worth the risk. As stupid as the Conservative slogan.
Mr. Speaker, a survey released this morning by financial firm Edward Jones Canada said Canadians are stuck in a chaotic whirlwind of personal financial stress. The poll clearly shows that Canadians are preoccupied with just getting through the day, and that the idea of paying debt feels like a distant dream. Wow. It found 88% of Canadians saying their personal financial situation is affecting their well-being. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Won't the Prime Minister stop his inflationary spending so people can take back control of their lives?
Good question.
No, you're going to get the same talking point back from the Liberal. This is becoming so inane. Another parliamentary secretary. But when you say he's just not worth the cost, you're implying that if he was just a little less expensive, he would be worth it. And this is how stupid talking points completely overshadow the best intentions of the Conservative Party. I mean, we are in a crisis in Canada right now. And if they think it's about him not being worth the cost, then they had better start re-examining things, and they're going to see their poll numbers dropping because people are going to wonder, they don't get it, do they? And they had better start getting this because we have got so many monumental problems in this country that are taking away our basic economic and political freedom. And we have got to focus on more than just he's not worth the cost. And you'll hear it a dozen more times today.
The NDP Liberal government and their inflationary spending so people can feed their families.
I welcome your comments, by the way, on anything today. We've been getting some great comments all week.
The Honourable Minister.
I wasn't sure whether or not doing this live every day was
what she said, Mr. Speaker, but
the greatest idea.
Words, why don't we talk about action?
I think it's evolving into something that's very important. And we need
the opposition
to
can
see
do,
these
Mr. Speaker.
plans in action.
I agree, but there's one thing.
And to
they
see
can vote for
how
the affordability
vacuous
bill.
they are,
Really
and how
the lady that she
empty
refers, why don't she
their
convince her
words are.
caucus to vote for the affordability bill so they can do something once for Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 8 years of inflationary Liberal deficits, cost of living is going up everywhere, but it's worse in Quebec. Nearly 5% inflation. That's the highest in Canada. Everything costs more. Interest rates going up. Young people are losing their dreams of owning a home. And you know what? The Bloc Québécois isn't helping either. They want to radically increase the carbon tax. It's expensive to vote for the Bloc. Will the Liberal government admit that it's time to stop taxing Canadians and Quebecers more?
The
Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind my honourable colleague that Quebec was the first to set up its own cap-and-trade system for carbon more than a decade ago, well before the federal government did it, well before The provinces did it. If my colleague has trouble understanding that system, I'd be happy to explain to him how Quebec's system is unique in Canada and one of the first in North America.
That guy is a complete joke.
The honourable member from Mégantic-Clairant. You know what Quebecers understand? They understand that when they go to the grocery store and they pay 23% more for food than 3 years ago, they know, they understand, they see that the carbon tax has a direct impact on how that food is transported, how it's produced. They see the effect of the Liberal Bloc tax that they want to increase when it's time for them to pay for food at the grocery store. More and more Quebecers are going to food banks, and they are middle-class Quebecers. Are they not ashamed of this, or are they just going to keep taxing them?
Keep taxing. I know they're not ashamed of it.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague from Mégantic-Clairant for the question. But for all the people in Mégantic-Clairant watching us now, there's one thing their representative can do. It's to convince Conservative MPs to vote for the Affordability Act. And why? Because we're going to change competition. We're going to give more power to the Competition Bureau. We're going to focus on practices that don't help consumers. I want him to do his job and convince his colleagues to vote for this once and for all. The Honourable Member for Joliette.
All right. So Guilbeault has the nerve to stand up there and say he's prepared to explain the cap and trade system in Quebec to this member of parliament. But Guilbeault is the same one who just last week said he is going to shut off the natural gas in this country if we're not meeting our climate change quotas. And he says that's what fighting climate change is all about. People freezing, people starving. That's what fighting climate change is all about for him, because that's all that matters, is meeting his net zero targets. And this is such utter foolishness, and it is going to destroy the country. I cannot say this with more earnestness and sincerity. It is going to destroy life in Canada as you and I know it. And these people don't give a damn about that, because it's all about serving an ideology. It's all about fighting climate change. Even if Canada produces virtually none of the greenhouse gases that he links to climate change, it's not going to make any difference at all on the global sphere. And it is remarkable how they are allowed to get away with this charade day after day, month after month, year after year.
There's talk about a new minister for the Treasury Board, the one who holds the purse strings, and she still doesn't have a mandate letter. Public services, defense, transport, justice, official languages, the list goes on. When is the Prime Minister going to give them their mandates? The Honourable Minister. I would like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. The mandate letters have not changed for the new ministers. So all the ministers know exactly what they need to do. And those letters are public. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, there's a human cost to governing on autopilot. The Auditor General confirmed that more than half of immigrant applications for permanent residence are being processed late. For refugees, there's almost a 3-year wait. It can even stretch out to 4 years for spousal sponsorships. The federal government, in the meantime, is raising its immigration thresholds, even though it's on.
I want to make a point here again about how the Speaker completely tried to thwart democracy yesterday. Read a letter that appeared to be written by Justin Trudeau, is threatening the MPs with disciplinary action if they don't behave themselves in a nice liberal way, repeatedly starts question period late, and repeatedly doesn't seem to know where he is half the time, or who is up next asking a question, or what he's supposed to do next. he's clearly not ready for this role.
A Canadian couple with a 6,300 square foot mansion in France on 37 acres. If they sold it, they can't afford to move back to Fergus, Ontario. Wow. This NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. And yet every day they stand up, puff up their chest to tell Canadians what a great job they've done. Why don't they stop gaslighting Canadians and admit they've broken housing in Canada?
Now, there goes the sound. They don't want you to hear the MPs do anything except
Mr. Speaker, if we're going to tackle the housing crisis,
ask
we have to work
questions
together
and
and
answer.
pursue agendas that are
Except they
serious.
don't.
This
They
government has
don't
put
answer.
forward a number of measures. For example, lifting GST on purpose-built rentals, period. That side is proposing a tax on the building of middle-class rentals. Shameful. Rentals for middle-class individuals and families, that construction would be taxed by that side. They also don't want to work with municipalities. We put $4 billion on the table for that. They want to cut all of that. They need to build more. We will build more on this side, not with that approach.
Then I have Deputy de Dufferin.
The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon.
The housing crisis is we should support more of their failed policies. That's their answer, Mr. Speaker. It's a special kind of incompetence. If you don't have a house, you can't afford it. If you have a house, you can't afford to keep it because interest rates are so high from their inflationary deficits, Mr. Speaker, and yet they keep spending and spending and spending, and interest rates go up and up and up. And Canadians are at risk of losing their homes. Will they get these inflationary deficits under control so Canadians actually don't lose their home?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Reminders, it's no problem. When they were in office, and that leader now, that opposition leader was the so-called Minister of Housing.
Oh. Time to shut the sound off again.
Dufferin-Caledon, who had just asked a question, to please let the parliamentary secretary respond to his question. From the top, the honourable parliamentary secretary.
As I was saying, they need reminders, Mr. Speaker. The Harper government had put $300 million towards housing. You know how many homes were built, Mr. Speaker? Less than 100. At a time when it's clear that the lack of supply has created an increase, a vast increase in the cost of rent, this government is moving forward to build more, to help the private sector do exactly that. That side, as I just said, wants to tax the construction of rentals for the middle class. On top of that, they don't want to work with municipalities to get the results we need. It's not a serious agenda. It's a reckless agenda on the other side.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Liberal NDP government blew $1.5 billion on bureaucracy, and the homeless crisis has never been worse. A quarter of the homeless are seniors, and this is only an estimate. The real number is much higher. With ballooning interest rates, rising food costs, and the housing crisis, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. When will this Prime Minister start caring about monetary policies so seniors that built our country are not left out on the street?
Yeah, there we go. They cut the sound off. Amazing.
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've made significant progress to help seniors
not
since
famous
2015.
for Reagan.
And these efforts have reduced poverty for seniors over 65. The facts are the GIS increase helped lift 45,000 seniors out of poverty. Restoring the age of retirement back to 65 prevented 100,000 seniors from falling into severe poverty, against the wishes of the other side, I should say. And these benefits are automatically adjusted to keep up with the cost of living, and they will never go down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Then I have Deputy de Nunavut.
Okaktitiyi First Nations for decades have screamed about the deplorable conditions they live in. Statistics Canada now confirms.
I ask again to those watching, Do you want to hear the Conservatives continue to parrot this line? He's just not worth the cost. Over and over again. Do you think it's an effective slogan? Do you think it really encapsulates the crisis we're in with Justin Trudeau? Or does it minimize it? Does it make it look like it's not really that serious a problem? You know? All he has to do is just lower the prices a bit, and he'll be fine.
Of housing have been built or renovated since that time, Mr. Speaker. And we continue
This
to invest
this
in
woman is an
affordable housing,
absolute
not
nightmare.
just for First Nations people, but certainly for Indigenous people in urban, rural, northern communities. Mr. Speaker, compare that to the record of the Leader of Opposition. For $350 million, 99 houses built. We can do better as a country, Mr.
Thank
Speaker,
you.
and that's what we're doing.
Thank you, people. Thank you, people. Holly, Karen, thank you for responding, because I think these are things that small C conservatives, whether you're supporting the large C Conservative Party or not, I think most of us are, in terms of the only viable solution to Justin Trudeau. But we can't buy into their talking points and the crap. I mean, I'm in nobody's political pocket. I'm in nobody's political pocket. When I see BS coming from the Conservatives, I'm going to say that. It's BS. These are horrible talking points that are not going to win elections. That's why I say they always have a knack for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They always do. Because they think they have to minimize their attacks, and they don't want to really be realistic about how poorly Justin Trudeau is doing. And he is driving this country into the ground.
We're counting on
here's Guilbeault once again making the false assumption that forest fires have something to do with climate change. He is so full of
fighting climate change. Thank you,
rubbish. And of course he knows that there's no proof of that. Forest fires this summer were caused by arsonists, not because climate change. Why would? Because Canada is not doing anything to create conditions for forest fires. Why isn't the carbon tax so effective? If the carbon tax is so effective, let me ask you. The carbon tax is so effective, why did we have all these forest fires? If the carbon tax really fights climate change, and climate change is responsible for forest fires, why do we have so many forest fires in this country? What's it going to take? What kind of a carbon tax? A $3 a liter carbon tax? Is that going to fight forest fires? These people are so crazy with our money, and they don't care if any of it makes sense, because it's all ideology.
Payments, enhancing low-cost banking options, lowering non-sufficient fund NSF fees, ensuring that Canadians have an impartial advocate when they have complaints against their banks. Mr. Speaker, today and every day is a great day to fight for Canadians, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Then I have Deputy de Foothills.
It's this simple. Higher taxes on farmers, on truckers, on processors means higher food costs for Canadians. Canadian farmers will pay close to $1 billion in carbon taxes alone by 2030. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost. But Conservatives are bringing forward common sense solution, like legislation that will exempt the carbon tax from on-farm fuels like natural gas and propane. But the Liberals are trying to kill this bill at the Senate, despite all party support here in the House and in the Senate. Why is this Prime Minister fighting so hard to make sure that food and farming remains unaffordable?
Good question.
No, I mean, who have they found to answer this?
Minister.
we can't decide.
I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all members that until they're recognized by the chair, that the microphones won't go on. The Honourable Minister.
Look a little tiring.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate my honourable
Lawrence Macaulay.
question, but I
He's,
think
he's,
he fully
I think he's related to Christy Freeland. They both have this habit
farmers
of
fully depend
waving
on what
their
happens in the climate. When in Prince Edward Island we had a hurricane,
waving their
Fiona,
fingers
it
at
blew
people.
warehouses down. It blew dairy barns down. It killed cattle. And Western Canada, which my honourable colleague is from, straw is worth $300 a bale. In the prairies, it burnt and they had floods. Quite simply, Mr. Speaker, if we do not deal with the climate, we will not ever do anything about the price of food or be able to help farmers. We will continue to address the climate issue in this country.
What a evil response. Oh, God, Macaulay should be put out the pasture.
Then I have Deputy de
That wasn't even a good
Liberals
talking
set
point.
aside $300 million to ACOA to deal with Fiona for farmers, but not a single dime has gone out the door. But all parties in this House supported this legislation. Even the Greens understand how important farming is.
Wow.
After 8 years of higher interest rates and inflationary costs, and now not one but two carbon taxes, this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. The Prime Minister is fanning the flames of inflation with yet another carbon tax on Canadian farmers. Why will this Prime Minister not respect the will of this House and axe his farm-killing carbon tax?
This is really incredible how they've shut the sound off. I'm going to have to fish around and see if there's anything. I think it's this damn
Mr.
speaker.
My honourable colleague is correct. Fiona did incredible damage, and I'm proud that as the minister responsible for ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, we did receive $300 million. $100 million of that has gone to small craft harbours. There was $40 million that has gone
you're good friends.
to Parks Canada. We now have a program on the table that is offering funding to build climate centres. I think there's $9 million left in the fund. I'd be glad to give the honourable member details. I'll get back to him on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Gene Baker, thank you for saying you're so sick of that saying they're not worth the cost. That's exactly what I was saying yesterday. I first heard this. It reminds me of 2015 when they said Justin Trudeau was just not ready. I thought, that was the most feeble election slogan I had ever heard. Does that mean he's going to be ready in a couple more years? I mean, it was a stupid election slogan, and this was just as stupid. But you know why? It's those backroom conservative organizers, the same idiots who ran Harper into the ground, who lost the 2015 election because they were so insulated from real voters and from the grassroots of the party. They're at it again. We cannot let them destroy Pierre Poilievre the way they want to. Oh, let's listen to this clown.
Mr. Speaker, she doesn't want the carbon pricing rebate to go away. Why would Conservative Party of Canada cut this program from Jill, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, question. I see a question here from Jay. How could the CPC be okay with this choice of speaker? God only knows. They're probably afraid not to vote for him. But it turned out to be one of the worst choices for speaker I can remember in my lifetime of watching politics. Even worse than Peter Milliken, who was pretty difficult to deal with at times. But this guy is so arrogant, so full of himself, and such a goddamn schoolmaster who's treating everybody like they're in kindergarten.
Mr. Speaker,
These are the words from the government's own impact assessment on their clean fuel regulations. Quote, the regulations are estimated to increase the price of gasoline and diesel. Quote, low-income households may be disproportionately affected by regulations. Quote, rural Canadians may have limited opportunity to reduce their fuel consumption in response to higher fuel prices. Why did the government ignore their own advice and plow ahead with a second carbon tax?
If the Conservatives have a problem with my accent in English, I'll answer in French. A professor wrote
You're just as
that
stupid
he
in
had
French.
just received his rebate, and this year he'll get $720. So that's over $13 a week.
See how
Bob
stupid
says
this is?
he's getting more money back thanks to this rebate, and he's calling on us and the Conservative Party to.
These people are such morons. So they take $100 from you and they give you $5 back as a rebate. That's called crime. And these people are so bloody caught up in their ideology and their own stupidity, they can't even acknowledge that. It's infuriating to watch this clown, this Greenpeace extra, come on the stage and do his little act. All he was a stunt master at Greenpeace. He was an environmental extremist. He belonged to an organization that was basically at times committing eco-terrorism. And this is our Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. And he is such a complete goof who has no idea how ordinary Canadians live and has no compassion for people who are starving or freezing because it's all about climate change. And I am so sick of these people getting paid top dollar for destroying this country.
For his work on this very important issue.
Oh, no. This is called answering the softball.
To proceed with systematic reforms to the culture of sports. Our sports system involves our children, and we expect leaders and coaches and so on to be accountable.
What the hell is he talking about?
A lot of work has been done, and there's still more underway. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Is this a transgender question
Member
or
for
what?
Abbotsford-Timiskaming. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always the same with the Liberals. They make announcements when they feel the heat, and then they drop the ball. It's been a year since the former Minister of Sports promised a public inquiry into sexual misconduct in sports. After a year of inaction, the Prime Minister didn't find fault with her. He promoted her. Mr. Speaker, Canada could have been a world leader in the fight against sexual misconduct in sports, like it has been in fighting doping. Instead, Canada gets nominated.
Good question here from Discerning Dilemmas. Why is he, meaning Stephen Guilbeault, not questioned about his Chinese trip? No, he got no questions at all. How about that? I think he maybe, to be quite accurate, he maybe got a couple of questions from the Conservatives about that, but it was not exploited and not accurately assessed the way it should have been. This guy is hanging around with communists, Chinese communists, who agree with him. Except the Chinese communists are playing him like a fiddle. They have no intention of playing along by Guilbeault's rules. And he goes to China. He cavorts with Chinese communists. He loves being a member of the Chinese Communist Environmental Group. And he comes home again and he gets away with this crap.
And the Liberal government, with the enthusiastic support of the Bloc, has invented and implemented a second carbon tax. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, a vote for the Bloc will cost you. And now the department admits it hasn't even assessed the impact by region. So transit is an example. Can the Bloc explain why they agree with this second carbon tax?
Well, that was a good question. I didn't hear he's not worth it. This was directed at the Bloc.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd be pleased to explain to my honourable colleague that Quebec does not have a carbon tax. They use a cap and trade system. And the standard for clean fuels that we implemented was one of the Conservative commitments in the 2021 election campaign. The difference is they only talk about it, whereas we here on this side, we do things. The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to explain to the minister that the first Liberal carbon tax does have impacts in Quebec because things bought from outside Quebec are affected by the carbon tax. And there's not that much transit in regions versus Montreal, but the fact is that Quebecers are going to have to pay the second carbon tax when it comes to transit. How does the government explain that to people?
They don't. They have no intention of explaining it. This is driving me crazy how they shut the sound off now between questions and answers. This goddamn speaker, I've never seen such a dolt put in that position. He's just an authoritarian little dictator.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my honourable colleague from Louis Saint Laurent and for all the viewers from that riding. But the people in La Tuque expect one thing. They expect the member for Louis Saint Laurent to be, they know that he's a reasonable man, that he speaks on behalf of the Conservative caucus. He's an influential man. So I'm sure that he will convince his colleagues once and for all to vote for Canadians and to support our affordability legislation. That's the best way to help Canadians.
Clown. Incredible. They just shut this. No. The ratings are bad enough. The ratings are bad enough for question period.
Order, colleagues.
Yeah.
The honourable
Now
member
they've
for Lévis,
shut the sound
Lotbinière.
off.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, they go and introduce a second carbon tax without even assessing regional impacts. With the help of the Bloc Québécois, who want to radically increase this carbon tax, voting with the government twice. The Bloc isn't thinking about Quebecers who are struggling to make ends meet. A vote for the Bloc will cost you at the grocery store, at the pumps, and when you're looking for a roof to put over your head. Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is washed up. So why is the Bloc supporting the costly carbon tax that's hurting Canadians
I think washed
and
up is better than not
Quebecers?
worth the cost. Josh, you came up with a better talking point than your backroom Conservative strategists who are washed up as well, always have been. I know them. I used to work for MPs. And I can tell you that they've all been told to include this talking point, not worth the cost, in their questions, or else the questions will not be accepted. And that's exactly what we don't want from a peer quality of government. And that's exactly what we don't want from a peer quality of opposition. We need some freedom.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question, but what's hurting is the interpreter's ears, Mr. Speaker. What he doesn't understand is that Canadians watching us in Lévis and other places, people are
You
watching.
think he was on the
they're
stage with
wondering,
Justin Trudeau?
will the Conservatives, for once in their lives, vote in favor of Canadians and helping them out with affordability? Because on this side of the House, it's clear. Will they, for once in their lives, vote for Canadians?
You know what the Affordability Act is going to do? It's going to raise the prices of everything. It's going to create food shortages. It's going to create nothing but chaos in this country. But it's like the bills that Biden introduces in the States, you know, that they had an Affordability Act there too. And they had the Anti-Inflation Act, which was actually inflationary. So it's the double think, the newspeak that comes from these woke liberals that means absolutely the opposite of what they say it does. Just like the Online Safety Act that's coming for censorship is going to do the exact it's going to make us less safe.
Crisis, and our government is hard at work to resolve it.
Here we
We've
go.
put forward Bill C-56 to kickstart new housing projects by eliminating the GST.
This is one chance this month to get up in the House.
But as we speak, the bill is still being debated in the House, and the help for Canadians all across the country is getting held up. Can the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development tell the House how this bill will help Canadians who are hard hit by the housing crisis?
It's embarrassing to watch these
The Honourable Minister.
MPs get up.
Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for Lac Saint Louis for his question. Bill C-56 will accelerate housing construction all across the country and create quality jobs. And we know that investing in housing construction reduces inequalities, Mr. Speaker, and helps build strong communities. But once again, the Conservatives are filibustering and refusing to support this bill. They're against social development and against housing construction, or are they just caught up in their own political games and they can't see that Canadians need help? My question is, will they help Canadians, yes or no?
Well, he's asking the question. Okay. Now that gets kind of confusing.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's closest intelligence allies have already clarified the record. This government has not. So I'm going to give the government an opportunity to correct and clarify the record. Will the government clearly state that the Israel Defense Forces and the State of Israel were not responsible for the explosion at the hospital?
Let's see how they waffle on this one.
Tuesday.
I'm dying to see how they waffle on this one. Pretty straightforward.
Mr. Speaker, what happened in Gaza is absolutely devastating. Palestinian civilians, Israeli civilians are equal and must be protected. You've heard the Prime Minister earlier today.
Stupid answer.
Canada and its allies are working to determine exactly what happened, and Canadians deserve answers.
So how long do you think it's going to take them to work out that answer? Probably about 6 months.
Cypress Hills grasslands.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, Canada has lost its reputation as a world leader in energy production. After telling Germany, Japan, and France that there's no business case for LNG, Qatar is now the supplier of choice for our G7 allies. This is the same Qatar that is housing the leadership of Hamas, the terrorist organization that is murdering innocent Israelis and Palestinians. Will the Prime Minister admit that there is not only a business case for LNG, but a moral one as well?
Mr. Speaker, it's just shameful to be drawing that type of a conspiracy theory when we're talking about such sensitive issues. But let's talk about how we are actually supporting our allies, because the facts are important. We are actually working with all of our allies in providing green hydrogen, in providing nuclear technologies. We are there to support our allies when they come looking to us for support. And I would ask the member opposite, if he cares so much about clean energy, why did he vote against supporting the creation of wind, offshore wind in our Atlantic provinces that creates good paying jobs and clean energy?
Excuse me. This is all nonsense.
Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Vito Lakes.
At least $38 million of a $1 billion green slush fund is under investigation for conflicts of interest and gross mismanagement. It's another example of corruption and scandal, and Canadians want to know who got rich. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, we have whistleblowers who are seeking career and legal protection for bringing Canadians' attention to this latest example of government waste and abuse. This Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. So Canadians want to know which BFF or family member or former staffer or Liberal lobbyist got rich.
My response to Jay, I was thinking the same thing, yeah.
Speaker, again, we need to rectify the facts, Mr. Speaker. I think there will be a number of small and medium-sized businesses in the country in the energy space and the environmental space, which will be shocked by this comment, Mr. Speaker. What we did the responsible thing. The moment we had allegation of wrongdoing, Mr. Speaker, we hired an independent third-party expert to investigate. Once we got the result of the investigation, Mr. Speaker, we took action, Mr. Speaker, and we demanded from that agency, like we would demand from all agencies of the Government of Canada, to have the highest standard of governance. That's what Canadians expected. That's what we did, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, this week is Small Business Week. Small businesses employ about 10 million Canadians and contribute about 40% of the GDP. From Indigenous people to new Canadians, we have a dynamic entrepreneurs in my riding of Nepean with small businesses in technology to tourism sectors. I'm glad our government has supported these local businesses. This week is an opportunity to celebrate them. Could the minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Ontario tell the House how we are supporting our hardworking small business owners and entrepreneurs across Canada?
L'honorable ministre.
Try to explain that.
Small businesses are the heart of Canadian communities, and our government is delighted to support small businesses like Madoaki Farm, which I had the pleasure of visiting with the member from Nepean. They offer a unique Indigenous experience and a marketplace for local Indigenous entrepreneurs. Our government is going to continue to support entrepreneurs and small business owners so they can reach their potential and develop new possibilities for Canadians. Thank you to all our small businesses across Canada for your commitment, for your dedication and hard work. Happy Small Business Week.
L'honorable député de Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, several water main breaks saw torrents of water pouring down the streets of Prince Rupert and flooding people's homes. Now there's a citywide boil water advisory, and this isn't the first time. Last December, the city had to declare a state of emergency due to its failing water infrastructure. So this is a port city, Mr. Speaker, that is critical to Canada's supply chain and our economy. Will the minister stand and speak directly to the people of Prince Rupert and assure them that timely federal help is on its way?
Of course, the member understands that all questions and answers should be directed through the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question, an important question at that. We know the people of Prince Rupert are facing serious water challenges, and we're closely monitoring the situation. Through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, we're helping communities protect their critical infrastructure while reducing long-term costs associated with replacing infrastructure following natural disasters. The minister has been working with Mayor Pond as well as the province on Prince Rupert's application through the fund to address its water challenges. We will always have the backs of the people of Prince Rupert, and we'll share more on this soon.
Don't you hate that word, challenges? You know, I guess what World War II was. It was a challenge.
Kitchener South.
Mr. Speaker, through the height of the pandemic, small businesses in my community, from Big Bliss Yoga to Full Circle Foods, did all we asked of them. Now, during Small Business Week, they need more than a selfie. They need time to ensure before what they thought was a grant will get turned into another loan they'll have to repay, and 18 days previously announced isn't good enough. If this government's got $30 billion for a pipeline that's only going to accelerate their own extinction, will they not step up for small businesses when they need it the most?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We understand the struggles that many small business owners had during the pandemic and that many continue to face. That is why we are offering additional flexibilities for small business to repay their CEBA loans. This includes a full one-year extension on the term loan repayment deadline, more flexibility on refinancing, and more time, Mr. Speaker, to access the loan forgiveness, which is both a balanced and a fiscally responsible approach. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Et ça met fin à la période des questions orales. Je comprends qu'il y a un appel.
Well, I guess that was the end of it. Eh? Oh dear. Anyway, let's just hear what the point of order is. Might be interesting.
If you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House recognize that according to Statistics Canada's 2021 census. The honourable member for La Pointe-Lille.
What the hell?
I would ask members who are having conversations to please continue those conversations outside the House so that all members
Somebody
can
needs to have a
hear
conversation with this guy.
request for unanimous consent.
Je vais demander au député de La Pointe-Lille de recommencer, s'il vous plaît.
I would ask the member for La Pointe-Lille to please start again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there has been consultation among the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion: that the House recognize that, according to Statistics Canada's 2021 census, the proportion of Quebec residents whose mother tongue is French has dropped from 77.1% in 2016 to 74.8%.
Oh, I can't believe I'm listening to this. Okay, that's the end of it. That's absolutely the end of it. Okay. Well, thanks for watching today, folks. And nobody's in tomorrow, so we won't be doing Friday, but I'll probably be back Monday, unless I'm covering the trial, and I probably will be. But we'll see what happens. It's painful at times to watch. I know I've watched it for years because it's part of the job, but it's painful to see how stupid your politicians are, your political leaders are. It's very painful, and keep fighting, resolve to resist, because we got to get rid of this Trudeau government one way or the other, because it is absolutely destroying our country, and I can't say that enough. And we need to do better than this. And I don't know if we can survive 2 more years. The NDP has got to make a decision to stop propping up this Liberal government. And there's got to be a non-confidence motion to get rid of them, because there's worse to come from Justin Trudeau, much worse to come. And I keep saying that, and we'll keep talking about that. Thanks for watching today.